So Annechien and Manuela, thank you very much for coming today and talking to us about an exploratory analysis of student behavior, performance, and evaluation in hybrid and blended first-year bachelor calculus course.
Thank you. So I'll be doing just a very short introduction and conclusion, and Manuela will take over the bulk of the work. And also the title, the very long title that we once chose for the HREC proposal, we left that. So, we only leave that for you to pronounce. And we just talk about online and or in-class learning, which is way shorter. And we have been looking at the student perception, student behavior, and the performance in the first year mathematics course. This is a repetition of the presentation that I gave at CEFI. And I started there by saying, when you want to implement online education and at a distance education, of course, you always worry a bit. I mean, you see the benefits. You want to add flexibility for students in time and space. You want to also increase the inclusiveness of our education for students that may have commute problems, that may have a care responsibility or other responsibilities at home. But we also see the drawbacks, especially for our own first-year students, the isolation, the lack of support, and the increased workload, because a lot of things that we normally have, a lot of information and other learning management, or let's say management of your classes and everything that is around following a course is usually happens on campus, and when you're not on campus, you have to do that all yourself. You have to find out a lot yourself, way more than when you hear it from your fellow students when you're in the classroom. So those are the worries that we have by introducing online and at a distance education, especially for first years. And that's why I think it's good to, and that's why we decided to follow what was happening in the first year course when one of the first year mathematics courses decided to go fully online. They wanted to offer a high quality experience and more flexibility, and it was self-selection by the students. So students could choose whether they want a fully online course or whether they wanted the on-campus course. The online offer was video lectures that the teacher recorded. It was a very nice online interactive book with integrated forum discussion and integrated simulations and everything. So the book really was high quality. They had exercises and they had meetings once a week for on campus for the online students specifically. Not many students appeared for that for those meetings, but they were there. So that's why the very long title, Blended Hybrid Online, because it's not a clear-cut distinction between an on-campus course and an online course. The online students, the ones that chosen the online course, could still come to contact meetings, and the on-campus students had access to all the same resources. And of course, whether you register for a specific course or not doesn't mean that you have to follow exactly those. You could still come to a class wherever you want to go. Anyways, our questions while monitoring this course last year were who selects the online classes? Does the student behavior differ based on the study format that is offered? Does the student performance differ based on the study format that is offered? And how do the perceptions of support and confidence of the students relate to the study format? So are online students more uncertain or more certain of a good, do they expect to get a higher grade? Do they feel equally supported or not? And I think you take over now, Olwen. Yes, good. Go ahead.
Okay, so the first thing we looked into was who was selecting the online class. So at the beginning of the semester, we asked all of the students who decided to participate in the study and who were in either the online class given by this professor or the in-person version. We asked them about their age. We asked them about whether they were repeating the course because we wondered if this might have been a reason why they were taking the course. And we also used an inventory on learning strategies to determine whether some of these had affected or were related to why they had chosen the course. So this included several questions on how they planned, monitored, regulated their studying, their effort management, their time management, how much they learned with peers, as well as how much they used spaced repetition in their studies. In addition to that, we asked the students who were in the online class why they had selected the online class. This was a multiple choice question, so they had several answers, but then they could also provide comments. So they could say, was it the quality of the class? Was it the time? Was it that they didn't want to commute? Or was it that they were repeating students or don't like the classroom? So in terms of the students who participated, there were in total 458 students in the in-person class and 49 in the online class. The online class actually dropped in participation quite a bit during the semester. Some students decided not to participate not to stay in the online class. Out of the 458 in the on-site class, 147 participated in the study. That's about a third. And then in the online class, about 2/3 of the students participated in the study. The students in the in-person class were on average 18 years old, whereas in the online class, they were on average 20 years old. And this reflects the fact that the percentage of repeating students in each one of these was very different. So in the online class, it was about 2/3, almost 2/3 of repeating students, and in the in-person class, it was about 14%. And what you see in parentheses is the corresponding percentage for the whole class, which tells us that our samples were roughly, as far as percentage of repeating students can tell, roughly representative of the overall class.
The non-online course was also given by the same teacher, right?
Yes, it was, and they had access to all the same materials, all of the same stuff. It's just that there were actual lectures that they had to attend or were expected to attend. So the first thing that we noticed in the first table, but also just here, is the age differences between the two groups. So in the in-person class, we have two distinct groups between the new students and the redoublants, so the students who are repeating the course. And you can see, of course, like the ages are very different, which makes sense because some students have repeated the class. One thing that drew our attention is that in the online class, the difference between the two groups is not that big. So there's a lot of redoublants, a lot of repeating students. But there's also, even among the new students, they seem to be slightly older. So these might reflect the fact that they might be atypical students, not straight out of high school, but there might be other reasons why they are selecting the online class. As I mentioned earlier, one of the other things that we wanted to check was if the learning strategies were maybe the reason, like if maybe the two groups, the students who had selected the on-site class or the online class, differed in the learning strategies that they used. So we compared in all of these, the orange line is whether like the new students and the pink line is the repeating students. And left is always in person, right is always online. This would be really important for you to recognize if there were differences, but there's basically no differences among any of the groups. So it seems like the repeating students and the new students don't have very significantly different learning strategies. in either of the groups, and that both of the groups are also not different from one another. So this means that, at least in terms of learning strategies, this didn't seem to be associated with why they had chosen the class. Okay. The next thing that we talked about was why did the students choose the online class? So as I mentioned, this was a multiple choice initially, but students could leave comments. So the most common answer was that they were taking the course a second time, which of course is reflected in the sample that we have, which is about 2/3 of the students were repeating students. So students generally mentioned that it was appropriate for redoublant since they had already seen the material. There were also mentions of them appreciating the increased autonomy that an online format could provide them. So they really like autonomy. A couple of students also mentioned the quality of the materials. So a big factor in why they had selected the course had to do with the fact that they had quality materials with which to follow the course. So this was the second most common answer. You can see a quote here from a student who says that the moyen mis en place était d'une excellente qualité. So they really lauded the website, and this was also reflected in the course evaluations for the course, in which students mentioned a lot of the time that they really appreciated the materials. And finally, there were a couple of comments that related to the fact that they didn't like going to the classroom, so students who prefer to study individually in different spaces where they are better able to concentrate, or that they like to have the choice of their own schedule, so they don't necessarily like to wake up really early to get to a class on a Monday morning at 8 a.m. All right, so this is all of the information that we checked from students before at the beginning of the semester. And then, so in order to check the differences between the two groups. The next thing we were interested in was student behavior. So are the students behaving differently in each one of the classes? And for student behavior, what we did was collect a weekly self-report from students, where students answered questions every week as to what activities they had engaged with. And this was a very detailed questionnaire where all of the activities were really clearly stated, as well as how much time they had spent in each one of those activities. So this could include the using the online book or doing exercises online. It could mean spending time in class in person in either exercise sessions or in class in a lecture, because we're collecting data from both the in-person and the online class, as well as whether they are doing exercises. And so we divide this 3 types of activities as you see, so online activities, in-class activities, and then autonomous exercise solving. What was really nice about doing the weekly self-report is that students are better able to remember what they are doing that actual week and not over or underestimate it. And so we wanted to really see how this changed over the semester. But as you might expect, there's 14 weeks, students are busy, and a lot of students might not end up answering all of the surveys. And so while we were analyzing the data, one of the questions that came up was, okay, which data are we willing to trust? Which students do we believe when they say something? And so this is one of the things that we did. So to check what data was reliable, we wanted to see whether there were differences in the self-reports. So in the reported times, if there were differences between the students who had answered a lot of the surveys versus the students who had answered only a couple of the surveys. So we wanted to see if the data is more reliable for one group than another. And the way that we did that is to check whether there were differences between these groups. So what we did was that we split all of the answers that we had for the students who consented to the study in 4 groups. The students who had completed less than 25% of the reports, the students who completed 25 to 50%, the students who completed a half to 3/4, and then the students who reported, who completed 75% or more of the reports. In parentheses, you can see how many students fall within each of these classes. So a lot of students actually completed a lot of the reports, but we still wanted to know if we could still use the data from the students who had reported a little bit less. Just to note here that the third group, between 50% and 75%, there's very few students, so there's going to be some error bars that are like really, really big. It's not that there was that much of a variation, it was just a very, very big group, very small group. So what we checked was, A, is there a difference in the learning strategies of these students? And B, is there a difference in the times that these students report for each of these 4 groups? So for learning strategies, each of these columns corresponds to one of the learning strategies. So monitoring, learning with peers, self-regulation, planning, spacing, and time management. And what you can see is that the groups don't seem very different from one another. So it seems like the average scores on each of the learning strategies is roughly the same for all 4 groups. So because the error bars overlap in each one of the situations. This is good for our purposes because it means that there's not anything that like catches the eye about how different the groups are. And so they might not actually be that different, the students in one group versus the other. Hopefully that makes sense. The next thing that we checked is whether they were spending a significantly different amount of time. So this might be a little bit confusing, but basically what it is each one of the lines correspond to the average reported time per week for each one of the groups with the legend over there. And then the shaded area corresponds to the error bar. So it's just followed. When there's no shaded area is because that corresponds to just one answer. So that's basically like data that you can forget about because it's one student. But the main thing that I want to draw your attention to is that in the first part of the semester, which is where we have most of the data, the times reported seem to overlap quite a bit between the groups. So it seems like the reported times between, like for the students in each one of the groups, seems to be roughly similar as well. It doesn't seem to be very discrepant or like different between the different groups, which makes us believe that it might make sense for us to just keep all the data, consider the data both from the students who reported all of their weekly time usage, but also for the students who reported their, who gave fewer answers over the semester. So based on this, we decided to use all of the students' data. And what we did was to look at how much time they had spent per week on online activities, on-site activities, and exercises. So this is what we found. Of course, this is not the data, that would be crazy, but this is our I basically fitted a regression model on the data for each one of the groups. And what you see here is the estimation, is the prediction of the model. So we have that the time spent online, for example, I don't think I have the legend. There we go. The time spent online is, so the online class is the blue one. The red one is the in-person class. Also, it makes sense that the error bars are bigger on the blue one because we had a smaller sample for the online class. And what you can see in the first one is that students in the online class overall spend more time than students in the in-person class on online resources, which makes sense. But what's interesting is that the time that they spent on online resources stays overall the same during the semester. But for students in the in-person class, the time actually increases over the semester. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the time on site for both groups decreases over the semester. So whether you're taking the course in person or online, students were attending class or on-site activities less toward the end of the semester than at the beginning of the semester. And then for the time spent on exercises, the time is roughly the same for both groups. And for both groups, it increases slightly over the semester, but it increases more for students who are on site than for students who are online. So just students who are on site tend to increase their time expenditure on exercises slightly more than students in the online class. So I think this is where I leave you.
So that was what they were doing, because you know, as I said in the beginning, students could freely move from online to on class. They could use all the resources. And now, how did they perform? Because that's, of course, very important as well. Do they get the same grades? And do they feel equally supported by the teacher? So on campus and online, no difference in grades. Now, of course, the online students were a bit older and many were repeaters, but at least, you know, for the group that self-selects online, they do equally well. No difference there. But the interesting part, of course, is that they do equally well with less amount of time. So they're probably a bit more efficient. No difference between the groups. Now, do they feel equally supported and confident? We asked them every week how they were feeling. I think it's an interesting thing to see how that evolves over weeks, but we haven't done that yet. But their average scores are hardly different, except for the expectation of success. So the online group is a bit higher in that they expect to succeed. Of course, again, these are mostly redoublants, so that's to be expected as well. But the interesting part for me, at least, is that the online group doesn't feel less supported and doesn't feel less that they understand things. So they can apparently follow the course equally well online as the ones that go on campus. So to conclude, our expectation that we would give students some flexibility in time and space and some more inclusiveness, I think we did that, but it was a very small number of students, of course. The drawbacks that you fear, the lack of support and the increased workload, we don't see that reflected in the numbers that we found today. I can't say anything about isolation, but at least for their behavior and their feelings of support and their grades, I think that's similar online and on campus. The very small number of students, yeah, that's a bit of that's. The teacher didn't think it was very nice because it cost him a lot of time to get the resources there, but I think the resources are appreciated by also the on-campus students. They feel equally supported, they have spent a bit less time online, and they acquire the same grade, so I think that's really good. We want to thank, of course, the teacher and the section head and the photography. And I want to end with a very nice quote. I mean, I thought Sasha was going to be here today, so I thought, okay, I'll put the best quote that we got from one of the students, like, oh, this is amazing. The teacher is wonderful. And, you know, he has just so much, but I didn't go online because I had all the amazing facilities online at my disposal if I decided to go to the regular course. He was a GM student. And even if I don't make it, I still am very happy to have followed this course. That was the remarkable student. And, you know, unfortunately, he didn't make it. I checked his grades and he failed. But, you know, he might come back next year as a redoublant.
You might be there now, yeah.
And, and doing it online. Anyways, that was our presentation, and we thank you very much.